reckoning for these silent machines is long past due.
Alright, welcome everybody. So I'm going to try something different here with my channel. I'm going to do these streams. I told, I had a conversation with John De La Rose today over the phone, and I thought, I'll just read some articles from Fandom Post so we can get a good grasp on things that are going on, current events, and it'll help promote his website and some of my products, or I guess my content that I'm writing on there, because I'm going to try to write more things on there. So let us start with that. Let's get something in the background. Caretaker. Yeah, that's a good one. Let's open this with Windows Media. All right. Let's open this. So every now and then, when John posts something on like Monday, he's got a kind of a roundup, what he calls a daily briefing. So that's what I'll start with. And let me do one other thing. I need to make sure people on his Discord know what's going on. So I'm going to get a link to the stream. I'm going to copy the link. Going to do an @everybody. Send now. There we go. Hopefully that's the right one. All right. Got it down. All right. So let's get this show on the road. Let's get a window up here. Oh, there's my stream. So let's start with this. Star Trek writer slams Strange New Worlds. Mouse creator wants revolution. Hayden Panettiere dead, and more. So, John starts off with saying he keeps meaning to take time off for the weekends so he doesn't burn out, but there's so much work to do, so many stories he finds. He needs an assistant. That's what I'm trying to do a little bit here with what I'm doing. He needs to grow this Substack about 3 times for him to be able to afford one. It is tough for him, so that's what I'm here for. Fandom Pulse is a full-time job, and we provide the best pop culture news out there. Please support us by grabbing a paid subscription. As you can see, I'm subscribed. Valve's creator wants revolution. Imagine by shock. Exactly. So let's start with this one. Marvel's new X-Men cast confirmed without Sydney Sweeney after months of fans campaigning against her over her politics. Marvel's X-Men reboot cast confirmed at D23 this weekend does not include Sydney Sweeney in any role, closing out months of casting speculation that turned unusually political for a superhero movie rumor cycle. Samara Weaving landed Emma Frost, the role most consistently linked to Sweeney's name since a Scooper account first floated her for the part back in April. The rumor mill ran hot for months. Industry insider account My Time to Shine Hello first reported Marvel was eyeing Sweeney for Emma Frost in April, and followed up in June claiming she was being eyed for an X-Men role. More broadly, without specifying a character, neither Marvel nor Sweeney ever confirmed any of it. That didn't stop the speculation from generating real volume online, including a June post asking fans directly who Sweeney should play that pulled over 610,000 views. Wouldn't want me catching John's hands now, would we? Yeah, can't catch John's hands. What stood out in the reaction wasn't just casting preference. A meaningful share of the pushback against Sweeney explicitly cited her politics rather than her acting. One widely shared reply read, "Marvel, please, no! There are a million other actresses who will actually embody this role. Little Miss MAGA, no!" Another fan pushed back on her fitness for the role by writing, "They'd prefer an actress that can act." A dig tied directly to the same wave of political rejection rather than any specific performance critique. The backlash traces back to last year when BuzzFeed reported Sweeney had been a registered Republican in Florida since June 2024, a revelation that followed a controversial American Eagle ad campaign and drew a direct comment from President Trump, who said her ad was fantastic once he learned she was a Republican. None of this means Sweeney's politics kept her out of the role. Marvel never confirmed she was seriously in contention for anything beyond Scooper speculation. Weaving's casting reads as a straightforward creative decision with no stated connection to Sweeney at all. What's genuinely notable is simpler and more direct. Actual fans, in real numbers, campaigned openly against an actress joining a Marvel franchise specifically because of her party registration and not her range or her resume. It's a different phenomenon than the usual wrong actress for this character casting debate, and it happened in full public view for months before the studio ever made its actual decision. Sweeney isn't hurting for work regardless. Between Euphoria, a steady stream of feature films, and headline-grabbing ad campaigns, her career has kept moving through every round of this particular fan campaign, with the willingness of a vocal fan contingent to say the quiet part loudly, rejecting an actress for a comic book movie because of how she's registered to vote, says something uncomfortable about where fandom's political litmus tests have landed in 2026. Does an actress's real-world politics have any place in casting debates for a superhero movie? Or has keep politics out of it become a rule only invoked when the politics is being kept out? Happen to lean right. I think that needs to be reworded. But I get the statement. I think the second one is the second thing here is what's going on here. And it's funny when it comes to people who are like, oh, I don't want to get political when it comes to talking about movies. When you get into the meta here, the casting decisions are political. You can't ignore it. Or if you ignore it, then you are burying your head in the sand. You're actually not really as engaged as you should be on these things, I believe. Bans, both of them. Cyborg Justice says, what do you expect from activist-minded types that can't handle being people being conservatives or just don't agree with far-left ideology? From libertarians to classical liberals to independents. They don't realize that if they get the communism they desire, there won't be any more comic books or comic book movies. Will not be supporting or buying this in solidarity with Sweeney. Or Sydney Sweeney. Not because she's attractive, but because she's correct. She's been segregated and she has more merit. Yeah, do you know if they did make her, put her in the role, I think this film would get a lot more people to watch it. This is not a marketing decision. This is why the whole go woke, go broke thing that people used to promote. It's not tenable because these people don't care. They're always going to make these political decisions. Has kept politics out of it become a rule only invoked when politics being kept out happen to lean right? Yes. Why do you ask when you already know the answer? Well, because Fandom Pulse likes to ask that because you answer the question. The answer's been the same for decades, exactly. Yes, it's a poire pudding stream. I am poire pudding. The war with Red Jair, it goes on. I think. I don't know. I have to read his community post to find out if he's still at war with Red Jair. Thinks Samara looks the part way better. I think the casting is better with Weaver. Sweeney's clock is ticking. Well, everybody's clock is ticking. What are you talking about? So, OBS is having trouble connecting. Am I still live? Hopefully I'm still live. Not a comment on the article per se, but why do you have an image of Margot Robbie next to Emma Frost? I know Samara Weaving looks similar to her, but they're actually different people. Ooh. Yeah, maybe that should change. I thought about that too. I thought, okay, is Margot Robbie going to be mentioned in this article? This is serious and dangerous. Until a few years ago, someone's grandfather was a communist. He or she could find a job, any job. Now it's the other way around. Beware, people. Yeah. You know, it's funny. I was talking with Brian C. about this. I did not know this at the time, but the guy who plays Hulk, can't remember his name off the top of my head. I think he is from a family of immigrants from Cuba. In fact, let me confirm that right now. Mark Ruffalo, that's who it is. Let me confirm that right now. No, his heritage is primarily Italian from his father, who was Girifalco. Maybe I'm remembering this incorrectly then. Anyway, I'm going to continue on with the articles. I just know that there was some reason why he keeps on getting picked for various roles, and why he became the Hulk and not someone like... was it Sam Worthington? All right, we're going to continue on with the movies and TV section here. But let me look at chat. Seems like a private equity thing, like it's expected to fail or part of managed decline like everything else. Yeah, the Marvel stuff. Here John's talking about how Star Trek novelist Kristen Catherine Rush says she's done with Strange New Worlds, and her former editor explains why the show fell apart. Not Kristen, Christine. Hugo winner Christine Catherine Rush has watched Star Trek television and written Star Trek fiction for decades. This week, she's announced she is done with Strange New Worlds, and she picked the show's puppet episode as the moment she stopped caring. Rush posted her reaction the moment the promotional images went up. Wow, just saw the promo pics for the latest Star Trek Strange New Worlds episode and thought, Well, another episode I'm not going to watch. So far, the series is batting 0 for me. I'll doubt I'll watch any more episodes. So sad. I have no idea why they decided to do gimmicky things instead of telling Star Trek stories. There I was, sad there would be no Trek after the next season. Well, there's no Trek now. Bye. Rush is not a casual complainer. She has written tie-in fiction across multiple franchises and edited the magazine of fantasy and science fiction for 6 years. And her name carries weight with a generation of readers who bought Star Trek novels when those novels topped bestseller lists. Her former editor at Pocket Books, John Ordover, offered an explanation for what happens to his show once its ending has been announced. Ordover spent over a decade running Pocket Star Trek's line, co-creating spin-off series like Star Trek New Frontier and editing several volumes of the Strange New Worlds anthology line that predates the show. He said, "I've seen this over and over. Once the writer-producer find out the show is ending, their focus switches to getting their next job, and they just go through the motions of putting on the show." Paramount confirms Strange New Worlds will end after its 5th season. Season 4 is the second to last stretch of episodes the writer's room will ever produce for this incarnation of Pike's Enterprise, and Ordover's read lines up with what viewers have been watching play out on screen since the season premiere. The puppet episode itself was announced at San Diego Comic-Con, where showrunners Akiva Goldsman, Henry Alonzo Myers revealed the Enterprise crew would be turned into puppets built by Jim Henson's Creature Shop for a Season 4 episode. It follows a season that has already run a black and white noir episode built around Una impersonating a Casablanca-style double, a body swap comedy, and a horror-inflicted outing before it. One reviewer covering the noir episode for TrekCore wrote that the genre exercise no longer felt as gimmicky as it had the week before. Oh, something's going on with the citation here. Which by itself concedes that the prior episode did feel that way. A review at AIPT covering the same episode described the series as too often reading like theater kids doing an exercise. Coverage at MovieWeb of the same black and white outing called the stylistic choice unnecessary for a Star Trek episode. A recap at Cooled Toured went further, stating outright that the gimmicks had become the whole point of the show and that they had grown tiresome to watch season after season. You know, you can do gimmicky stuff, I want to say. Farscape was a lot about the gimmicky stuff. Almost every episode that happened in Farscape was some kind of gimmick. They had their own ongoing story, but it was one of those things where they just kind of played around with a lot of things. And it did very, very well. Now, it ended after 4 seasons, but it still has a cult following. Mike C. the Scout says, a lot of these woke people who aren't toucan seem to be Italian. Dave Filoni is the perfect example. Why do people call me Poir again? I don't know. Haven't tried to figure that out. Guess because I was a fan of Synthetic Man. Still am, by the way. Most of the fans took on Poir personas. Thing is, unlike old Star Wars Expanded Universe, the Star Trek books were not canon. Yeah, and they probably didn't need to be. I like going off in other directions, seeing what other creators like to do with franchises. But this is not new. Oh, let's see. Where are we? We're here. Viewer comments piling up on the show's Rotten Tomatoes Season 4 page echo the same complaint from the audience side, with one viewer noting that 3 of the season's first several episodes were gimmick episodes back-to-back and asking the producers to rework the finale to look more like Season 1. This is not new behavior from the Kurtzman era of Star Trek. Alex Kurtzman, an Abrams protege who has overseen the franchise since Discovery, presided over a Season 2 of Strange New Worlds that already leaned on a musical episode and a Lower Decks animation crossover before Season 4 ever ran a single frame through Jim Henson's workshop. What critics like Rush are describing is not one bad episode. It is a pattern that started years ago and has now reached the point where a working Star Trek novelist who has spent her career inside this franchise says she is finished watching. Rush's post and Ordover's response are part of a widening chorus of Star Trek veterans, professionals who built careers on this franchise when it was selling millions of books and drawing tens of millions of viewers, now saying plainly that the version airing under Kurtzman is not the same show, and that fans who defended it for years were being sold something else entirely. The people who built Star Trek's publishing empire in the 1990s are walking away from the current show. What does that say about who Paramount is actually making it for anymore? Oh yeah. If you want to read or support John in some of his other endeavors, he's got this Valiant Frontiers book. I actually have this. I back ordered it. I just haven't read it. I'll probably be listening to it in the car if there's like an audio transcript. But I probably should just sit down and read this stuff, because that's usually better than listening to it via audio. I just wish I had more time to just sit down and read stuff. First contact with the Iridians was supposed to be humanity's proudest moment. Instead, their chief engineer is dead, their ship is sabotaged, and an ancient alien technology is stealing souls. Book 1 of the Valiant Frontiers series delivers exploration, mystery, and the kind of crew you'll want to follow across the galaxy. You know, it's funny, I mentioned this with regard to all the physical media versus like discs, you know, the people who are talking about like PlayStation, for instance, and they want physical discs, and PlayStation wants to make everything digital. I don't think there's any reason. I was just thinking about this regarding books. You could buy a book like this digitally, but John actually gives you the opportunity to buy some of his books hardcover, or like leather bound sometimes, or just, you know, special things like that. Now you have to pay a little bit more for that, but this is something that if you wanted to say that, like, oh, we're trying to get away from physical media because it's just not financially feasible, all PlayStation would have to do was say, okay, we'll give you physical media, but to produce it, you'll have to pay a little bit more because of the costs involved. And I think people would do that. I think people would go for physical media. So to me, I don't think the we just need to go digital media argument works in that case. You could just go digital media and just have people pay a little bit more for it. I get it, I love Trek, really, obviously. But the Subspace Rhapsody episode was a lot to swallow for an old TNG, DS9, and Voyager fan. The Lower Decks episode? Nearly choked. Don't get me wrong, I love the SNW era. I just struggle with the show. Enjoyed a few. I've not enjoyed a few. I still watch it, just in case something good happens. Look at the rest of these. Oh, we got a $10 from Paul Nguyen. $10. Thanks for your great essays on Fandom Pulse and thoughtful commentary. Well, you're welcome, sir. Thank you so much. I mean, I had a lot of back and forth with someone saying they hate EGAD and Synth and were fans of Memory Runner, even the... Oh, this is the Memory Runner stuff? Yeah. More or less decent or sometimes good Trek we got was the off-Kurtzman stuff. I agree with JDA and that Prodigy is the most Trekish series, and some of the short Treks were actually great. Lower Decks was fantastic as a spoof, but if you take away the jokes, it's actually real Trek underneath. Picard Season 3 was done without Kurtzman's supervision and immediately got better, even though Metalis could have really used a good chaperone. Early SNW was better, as it was also during the time when Kurtzman was producing The Man Who Fell to Earth. Discovery also became a little better when the final seasons were written during the same time. So yeah, As a Trekkie, I'm also continuing to watch the current stuff, but I feel like a battered housewife. I haven't watched anything of SNW Season 4 yet. I was on vacation, I have a lot of work. I have to work a lot, but that also has an advantage. I can binge all those stupid first 5 episodes and then concentrate on the remainder, which will hopefully contain some decent Trek and pick up Pike's arc again, but generally it's a full-blown postmodern catastrophe that we're dealing with. Storytelling with emphasis on emotions, psyche, identity politics, superficial spectacle, and those big swings, regurgitating and remixing other films and series, anything but Trek. A studio head who never cared about Trek, modern solace, and millennial-infested Hollywood corporate structures. A head honcho for Star Trek who's far from being a good filmmaker, let alone a true Trek fan. Theater kids and drugged-out Hollywood elitists as writers who have hijacked and gouged the once frowned-upon geekdom, but don't know anything about science fiction. A recipe for total disaster. That's exactly what we got. Can you imagine if, instead of joke puppeting the crew, they had gotten Jim Henson Company to, I don't know, make really gnarly new alien creature race, say Strange New Worlds? That couldn't be performed by a human? Crazy, I know. Yeah, that's what they used to do for Farscape. They had a lot of cool aliens that were all just elaborate costumes. And it was a lot of fun. Veterans have all been saying this isn't Star Trek. The fans have been saying it isn't Star Trek. Star Trek has been mostly dead since 2005. Yeah. Oh, Bill Holtz. He's got some articles we're going to read. This is what happens when you let stupid people take over. Yeah. Was fooling myself for many years. Stayed around. Yeah, so yeah, all these people are... There we go. All right. And Mouse. I've heard of Mouse. Art Spiegelman wants a revolution. That's the word the 78-year-old cartoonist used in the New Guardian interview published on August 15, telling reporter Sophie McBain that the U.S. needs a counter-revolution, and that he does not know where to look for it because the Democrats are so timid. Spiegelman did not stop at policy disagreement. He told The Guardian the Republican Party is at this point the equivalent of made men in the mafia, adding they've committed a murder, they're complicit in something, and they have to keep moving as a complicit unit, so it's very hard to get someone to blow the whistle and say this is crazy. He called the state of American politics worse than most things I know, and said, I just don't see how we get out of this. The specifics of the crime, he says, Republicans are covering up, never make it to the piece. Neither does any concrete plan for what a counter-revolution would look like. What readers get instead is mafia imagery, a claim that democratic norms have been destroyed, and a shrug toward the opposition party for being too timid to act. That vagueness is the story, and it lands harder once you know who is saying it. Spiegelman was born in Stockholm in 1948 to Polish Jewish parents who survived Auschwitz. That history became the subject of Mouse, the graphic novel he serialized from 1980 to 1991, depicting Jews as mice and Nazis as cats. Ooh, Type 2 Productions would like to read in this. Built directly from his father's account of the camps. In 1992, Mouse became the first and still the only graphic novel to win a Pulitzer Prize. Yeah, I wonder why. Before Mouse, Spiegelman spent years in the underground comic scene of the 1960s and 70s, and he co-founded the avant-garde anthology Raw with his wife Francois Mouly in 1980. He also drew for Topps, contributing to Wacky Packages and Garbage Pail Kids. Oh no. After September 11, he produced In the Shadow of No Towers, a book responding to the September 11 attacks and their aftermath in Manhattan, where he lived. In January 2022, The McMinn County School Board in Tennessee voted 10-0 to pull Mouse from its 8th grade curriculum, citing profanity and a small nude illustration. Oh, Spiegelman called the decision Orwellian, and he told CNBC he was kind of baffled by this, adding, "I also understand that Tennessee is obviously demented. There's something going on very, very haywire there." A man who's defining life's work documents what happens when a government strips a category of citizens of their rights, using unaccountable state power and mob complicity as its subject matter, is now reaching for mob language and revolutionary rhetoric to describe an elected political party he opposes. Yeah, how about that? The book that that made him famous is a warning about what happens when people stop asking for evidence and start sorting the world into conspirators and bystanders. The interview reads like he skipped that part. Yeah, it's only okay when we do it. Boy. Vector Assassins join. Hello, sir. None of this makes Spiegelman unusual among figures in his corner of the entertainment and publishing world. Comparing domestic political opponents to organized crime or calling for a vaguely defined uprising against a sitting government has become standard content for outlets like The Guardian. What makes it notable here is the gap between the moral authority Spiegelman carries because of Mouse and the substance of what he is actually saying about American politics in 2026. The Holocaust literacy that built his career depended on precision, named perpetrators, documented policies, and specific atrocities. The counter-revolution he's calling for right now depends on none of that. Readers can decide for themselves whether made men in the mafia and unnamed murder clear the bar Spiegelman spent 40 years building. What is harder to argue is that this counts as measured commentary from someone warning about the dangers of unchecked rhetoric. Does invoking Holocaust-adjacent moral authority, described an elected position party as a criminal conspiracy, strengthen Spiegelman's case? Or does it cheapen the very history that made his name? Yeah, and this is, this is a reason why a lot of people do not like people of his particular ethnic ancestry. Because we notice there's a contradiction going on, a hypocritical thing going on. The Democrats are doing in Minnesota and elsewhere is literally what the mafia used to do. Control the votes, commit fraud, no accountability. If anyone dares speak up, they are physically removed. MAGA is the counter-revolution. Get used to it because it's going to win. In the meantime, have fun cozying up with all the Hamas fans in the Democratic Party. That's right. That is actually right. He's not criticizing Mamdani in New York, who's essentially gonna start putting like Sharia law in New York. So, have fun with that. Have fun criticizing cake bakers in Colorado for not making you a cake. But we're okay with Muslims throwing homosexuals off of buildings, right? The underground comics industry already helped establish in the 60s is perverse, violent, and subversive. It caused exactly the sort of damage and undermining of society it was meant to cause. Oh, but it's art. Bull. It's pornography, anarchistic and glorification of drug culture. It's grotesque in its presentation for the sake of being grotesque. Any wonder he did Garbage Pail Kids. Shocking for the sake of shock and violent for the sake of violence. We allowed it. Some of us even read and enjoyed it. Never understanding these comics were one of thousands of Trojan horses slipped behind the walls of our society to overthrow our culture, our traditions, and our sense of decency and propriety. Call me a square, oh no, but I'd rather live in a world of church-going morality than one corrupted by its degenerate forms of entertainment. And no, the analogy, Hitler's bad, Jew is good, as Republicans is bad, Democrats is good, does not work, Artie boy. But please, keep squeezing that stone. I'm sure the blood is from within it and not from your rage-clenched fist. Well, that is how the analogy works, yes. Let's go back to chat for a second. Puppetry is severely underused for alien designs. You either get humans in makeup or straight up humans with different clothes. Yeah. Total mouse death. Yeah, I read that about the Soviet invasion of Germany and what they did in high school. Who do you think I learned had more of a point? It's almost like the Soviets did what the Germans said they would. Yep. All wars are mouse wars. Banned books. I've never watched any of this garbage Trek. It was especially hilarious when I watched the Academy reviews and they kept talking about the burn and had to ask people if the BS was real. Soviets versus Germany was just a leftist civil war. The mouse garbage was forced in schools. I think I actually had to read some of it myself. Of course, it wasn't in high school or elementary school. It was in college, but that's because we were studying graphic novels. All right, so that's what's going on with Mr. Spiegelman. Ooh, lanterns. Everybody's talking about lanterns now. Lanterns premiere review. HBO's Green Lantern show buries a solid mystery under James Gunn's DCU baggage. Lanterns premiered on HBO Max this week, and the verdict on the first episode comes down to one pattern that has now defined nearly everything to come out of James Gunn's DC universe. The premise works, yes, but the execution carries just enough poison in it to ruin the whole thing. Lanterns follows that formula exactly. The episode, titled Pilot, written by Chris Mundy, Damon Lindelof, and Tom King, opens in 1996 with a young Jon Stewart watching Hal Jordan give a televised interview as Earth's newly assigned Green Lantern. John's father sets an apple on the boy's head and shoots it off without the child flinching. A scene meant to establish the Are You Afraid test that decides who gets to wear the ring. 20 years later, in 2016, John, Aaron Pierre, is training under Hal, Kyle Chandler, without a ring of his own, chasing what looks like a mass shooting at a high school football game in Rushville, Nebraska. 4 people turn up dead in matching sweatshirts. A suspect named Waylon Sanders turns out to be something other than human. The case pulls both lanterns into a militia compound run by a family convinced aliens are colonizing the planet. The episode closes on a jump to 2026, where John finds Hal's body frozen in the stadium bleachers, bullet in his forehead, and his ring missing. Taken as a pitch, it holds together. A small-town mystery, a sheriff who does not trust either lantern, militia stockpiling weapons against an invasion nobody else believes in. The bones of a strong hour of television sit right there. Even calls back to a little to the Green Lantern, Green Arrow, hard traveling heroes run from the 1970s, minus the road trip. But Lanterns is not interested in the cosmic side of Green Lanterns. John spends the whole episode without a ring, and Hal treats his like a party trick, popping a beer cap off with it at a barbecue. The whole show gets pitched as space cops walking around a Nebraska ranch rather than intergalactic peacekeepers, which reads less like a deliberate creative choice and more like a budgetary one. A show about a man with a magic ring who can build anything his mind conjures should not feel this grounded this fast. The bigger issue is how the show writes its 2 leads. Hal Jordan comes across as arrogant, reckless, and frequently useless. A guy who gets himself thrown in a building cell the night before his own hearing. A holding cell right before his own hearing. Jon Stewart comes across as calmer, sharper, and more disciplined at every turn. The guy the Guardians actually wanted for the job. Oh, I wonder why they're doing that, guys. Why is it the white guy is reckless and the black guy is far more, calm and sharp and smart, right? Why would they do that? That is the subvert expectation instinct that keeps showing up in this era of franchise writing. Take the character the audience is supposed to know and like, make him insufferable, then hand his job to the replacement everyone is supposed to prefer instead. It was obvious from the trailers and the press interviews before the premiere ever aired, and the finished episode confirms it. John is set up from the opening scene as the better Lantern. Hal exists to be replaced, and by the end of the hour, he's dead. The dialogue does not help the case. The F-word gets used dozens of times across a single hour on top of a steady stream of other profanity, none of which does any real work for character or stakes. Hal gets a line trashing Earth as a shithole at one point, phrasing that tracks close to a comment associated with President Trump, which lands as a wink rather than a coincidence given how relentlessly the show frames Hal as the angry, past his prime figure the audience is supposed to root against. Add a sheriff character who spends her scenes needling both lanterns, and John sleeping with the wife of the militia leader hosting him for the night. A detail the show treats as a minor complication rather than something worth examining, and the episode adds up to a lot of noise that a tighter script would not have needed. Visually, Lanterns leans into the same underlit, desaturated look that has become the default for prestige television. Browns, grays, and near black dominate scene after scene, which drains the color out of a character who is supposed to be a guy in a green suit fighting cosmic threats across the galaxy. Instead of scale and spectacle, the show plays a muddy, grounded buddy cop drama for nearly its entire runtime. The older cop written is bad at his job, the younger cop written is better at everything. Race clearly factoring into which one the show wants the audience behind. Yep, I called it. Let me guess, the invading aliens are misunderstood victims. Well, this is the first episode. I don't know if they're going to go into that, but perhaps. F-word, is it a slur or the swear? It's probably fuck. That's probably what it is. They would never say faggot on these shows. Even the bad guys wouldn't say that, because bad guys are allowed to kill people, but they're not allowed to be racist or bigots. I don't know, Egad. Maybe it is bad writing. Remember what Koopa says, negativity is bad. Negativity, yeah. The pacing suffers the same way most streaming dramas do now. An hour built around one mystery with a killer twist ending would have made a complete episode of The X-Files. Aliens discovered and consequences underway before the credits rolled. Lanterns barely gets past the setup stage in 60 minutes, the standard move for a streaming show stretching one season's worth of story across 10 episodes. None of this means the concept is dead. An alien threat that cannot be detected, a militia sitting on something bigger than it realizes, and a training arc for a new Lantern could all have made for a genuinely interesting premiere. It needed a Hal Jordan the audience could actually like, and a script willing to let the mystery breathe, instead of loading every scene with profanity and score settling. Instead, Lantern spends its first hour making sure viewers dislike the character everyone already knew was walking toward a bullet. And it never quite explains why a show built around one Green Lantern who never wears green earned the plural title in the first place. Killing off Hal Jordan in the first episode of a show carrying his character's legacy set up a genuine twist. Does it confirm Lanterns was never really about him to begin with? It means the show does not want me, my money, attention, or time. Woke black fatigue is real. Does not surprise me, glad I canceled my Max subscription. John's role is to step in his back off if Hal can't attend to it. Would have been more applicable to start with John's story of becoming a Lantern. Hal steps in, take him to training. Training scenarios happen at the Lantern Corps. John finds training a bit of a struggle because Hal and John's way of using the ring is completely opposite. In the middle of training, Hal gets called off on some galactic need, which cuts John's training short. He has to fly back to Earth, not fully prepared because XYZ crisis is happening. He uses his ring as correspondence to Hal through the crisis to build both characters as true hero characters they are. The ending is John loses correspondence to Hal, but the Guardians tell him the ring is still being worn. They just can't communicate with it. I think the first part of that might have been better. Is if well, you know, if you make your guy competent also in the very first episode, like more competent than the hero, like what are we writing on? Like this is why if you are making a hero, you got to make him, no pun intended, green. You got to make him inexperienced and show he's inexperienced, but that's why we're kind of rooting for him, because we want him to get better as time goes on. But yeah, this sounds like almost like the Miles Morales replacing Spider-Man thing that they've been doing. All right. Oh, this is sad too. I remember her from Remember the Titans. She was also in Hero. She played the girl who regenerates. No matter how much damage she takes, she can regenerate. She was also in a game called Until Dawn. Yeah, she's a real cutie. Hayden Panettiere died at 36. She told us how she'd get there. Hayden Panettiere is dead at 36, 5 days short of her 37th birthday. Greenville, South Carolina police responded to a 911 call reporting an unresponsive woman on Sunday afternoon. Dispatch audio obtained by People captured officials discussing an overdose and cardiac arrest. Paramedics administered advanced cardiac life support at the scene. It didn't work. Panettiere was pronounced dead at 2:32 p.m. The Greenville County's coroner's office has an autopsy scheduled to determine an official cause of death, and police say the preliminary investigation has found no signs of foul play. None of that should have surprised anyone who read her memoir. Panettiere published This Is Me, A Reckoning on May 19 of this year. In it, she wrote about a traumatic C-section, a uterine infection, 7 blood transfusions, and a postpartum depression that hit before she left the hospital. I wasn't okay, she wrote. I had to figure out how to bond with her. It felt like an insurmountable task, and I was only on the first day. She wrote about hiding bottles of Fireball from Vladimir Klitschko, the father of her daughter Kaya, and drinking from morning till night while telling almost no one. She wrote about entering rehab, leaving early to return to Nashville, relapsing within the show's fourth season, and eventually checking into an 8-month program in the last attempt to get sober. She said the same things in interviews for months before her death. On the On Purpose podcast with Jay Shetty and May, she described handing over custody of Kaya to Klitschko while she was in crisis. The idea that anybody would think I would just give away my child and be okay with it is heartbreaking, she said. It couldn't be further from the truth. In a 2022 interview with People discussing an earlier opioid and alcohol addiction, she put it more bluntly. I was on top of the world and I ruined it. I'd think I hit rock bottom, but there's that trap door that opened. That trap door kept opening. Her brother, Jansen Panettiere, also an actor, died in 2023 at 28. A loss, she said, compounded her grief. Her ex-boyfriend, Brian Hickerson, served jail time for abusing her. Neutrogena dropped her as a spokeswoman after a decade over a morals clause, once she started talking publicly about postpartum depression. She wrote in a memoir that Nashville writers used her real breakdown as material for her character's storyline while she was still living through it. That she was eventually written off the show because, as she put it, she needed a drink to function. A teenager who grew up on camera, forced in front of Hollywood and its destructive hellmouth for her entire childhood, then as a young mother, her worst days became a subplot on the show that employed her. Finally, we have a woman who told 2 different interviewers, 3 years apart, that she'd hit bottom before, and that the bottom moved. There was always another one underneath. Fandom Pulse has said for years that Hollywood's celebrity machine chews up the people it puts in front of the camera as children and spits them out with a publicist and a relapse. Panettiere spent a decade telling the industry press exactly that, on record in her own words, and the response was a memoir tour and a podcast circuit rather than an intervention. The tragic part about this is she wasn't living for her child, but for herself even as she grew older, showing the destructive course that Hollywood values and feminism take upon a life. The psychological abuse of this system leads women toward a destructive path, and this is a harrowing end that should never have occurred. She leaves behind her daughter Kaya, now 11. Her father, Skip Panettiere, called her an incredible light and a force of nature who brought immeasurable love and joy to all who knew her. Whatever the coroner finds, the record she left in her own words already says plenty about what almost 20 years in the industry did to her. How many more memoirs does Hollywood need before Cry for Help stops being a headline and starts being a warning somebody acts on? Apparently she was in Malcolm in the Middle. Yeah, she played a part. I remember. She was on opiates, yeah. I think she overdosed, yeah, on her meds. And all the money and fame, yeah, it didn't help. Instead, it drove her to suicide. Yeah, she should have led a happily life, even with her kids. And she had forethought to take her out of that situation. Writing plots around her addiction is level so low you can't imagine it, yeah. I think everyone has guessed by now what happened, either the COVID jab or by her own hand. She sounds like a tortured soul. I don't think it's COVID. Something like this happens, it fills me with irrational rage because I'm a mom of young babies. I know how much they need their mommy. I have a cousin who lost her mom and her sister, but she had young children. She killed herself while she was cuddling her 2-year-old. Just can't even fathom that. You get that some people have overwhelming grief and or trauma, but it's just not right for a mom to seek death instead of fearing it the most while having young babies that depend on them. Ex-boyfriend abused her. Yep, very sad, very tragic. Oh, what is this? Oh no. Some of these things would be more interesting to people, I guess, who read some of these books. Actually, I'll have to ask John what he talked about a book writer who talked about The Witcher, and there's stuff I don't know about The Witcher. Let's see. A Star Trek novelist tried to force an anti-Trump gay romance into officially published work and got rejected. Oh no. Elam Garak and Julian Bashir have spent 33 years as the most shipped couple in Star Trek who never happened on screen. Really? Outside of Kirk and Spock. So stupid. I'm pretty sure, well, it could have been one of his lies, but I'm pretty sure Garak was married. Now, novelist Una McCormack has written the version degenerate fans always wanted, a completed, unpublished manuscript titled The End of This Day's Business, in which Garak and Bashir kiss and end up sharing a household with a third man. McCormack posted an essay about the book's decade-long path to completion in Uncanny Magazine. Read together with the manuscript itself, the essay explains exactly why this book never made it to a publisher's desk and why Star Trek is better off for it. Garak first sat down across from Bashir in Past Prologue, the second episode of Deep Space Nine, back in January 1993. Actor Andrew Robinson said in interviews after that the show ended after the show ended that he played the scene as sexual interest from the first line of dialogue, deciding that Garrick's ambiguity was omnisexual rather than settling on straight, gay, or bisexual. Some of the proto-woke nonsense that invaded the culture, even though it wasn't explicit on the show. Yeah, it wasn't. Why would he say that? Of course, we know why we would say that. Showrunner Ira Stephen Bear later put it more bluntly, saying, "The character was clearly gay." None of that changes what aired. The writers built an entire season 5 arc around Garrick's obsessive, doomed heterosexual feelings for Torres Yal, Gul Dukat's daughter. Oh, that's right. That's what it was. Bashir spent 7 seasons chasing Jadzia Dax badly, then grieving her death alongside Worf before dating Ezri Dax. That gap between what actors claimed in convention panels and what the text of the show put in front of viewers is the entire engine behind 3 decades of Garrick Bashir fan fiction, going back to mailing lists and fan archive sites years before Archive of Our Own existed. Star Trek Lower Decks gave the fanfic shippers their moment in 2024's Fissure Quest, bringing Robinson and Alexander Siddig back to voice a parallel universe Garrick and Bashir depicted as married. What? Showrunner Mike McMahon framed it as 30 years of earned payoff. The episode itself hedges its bet. The Bashir in that scene turns out to be an emergency medical hologram, not the flesh and blood doctor from the original series. Even the show built to finally deliver Garashir couldn't commit to the real character. It stayed a Fissure University curiosity, not a Deep Space Nine fan. Thank God for that. Una McCormack is not a random fanfiction writer chasing a pairing. She has written 10 Star Trek novels across 4 series, and built a reputation as one of the more serious voices in the tie-in fiction line, working repeatedly on Cardassia's post-war reconstruction as a setting. Her 2013 novel, The Crimson Shadow, put Garrick in the middle of a fragile new Cardassian democracy under threat from insurgents determined to drag the planet back into authoritarianism, and ended with Garrick elected Castellan. Her 2017 follow-up Enigma Tales picked up years into his administration, with a Government Truth Commission investigating Cardassian war crimes during the Bajoran occupation, and Garrick forced to decide how much justice his democracy can survive. Both novels work as political fiction wrapped in a Star Trek binding, but don't venture too far into real-world politics. Both take Cardassia's reconstruction seriously as a subject. A third novel, The End of This Day's Business, was meant to close that trilogy. Instead, McCormack's own essay describes a manuscript she started in 2013, dropped for the better part of a decade, and finally finished in 10 days this past February after opening the file with no hope of ever seeing it published. She explains that lockdown convinced her Western institutions were too frayed and undermined to survive a crisis. It doesn't make sense. The lockdowns convinced her? And that the book became her answer to that fear. She cites the 2016 Brexit vote and Donald Trump's election as the specific moment she says pushed Enigma Tales toward urgency, and she frames the entire unpublished third book as a statement about defending democratic institutions from what she calls bad faith actors. This reminds me, by the way, guys, this is how people forget, this is how they were operating during this time. All these leftists wanted to kind of save the world from Trump and from people voting democratically for things. You know, they were saying, like, we need to save our democracy. It's like, how are you going to do that? You're going to make choices based on your own individual intuitions and not allow democracy to save democracy. It doesn't make any sense. But this is how their mindset worked, and they would do these things. They were Really, it really shows how the left wing really got, and still very much is, radicalized on a lot of these fronts. And they call us the radicals. But they kind of get away with it. They just get away with it left and right. They did get away with it during the lockdown period. Let's see. Lesbians don't exist, bro. Bashir was normal. Garrick was normal. Why do they have to try to subvert the characters? Because they were normal. Because they were heterosexual in the show. They were good friends. They were good bros. They talked with each other. It was a really good, and that was one of those things where you could do that at the time and not say that, and not think that they were gay at all. They would just kind of swap stories, philosophies, and be unbothered by anybody else. And it was a little bit of a thing for Bashir to do, to kind of figure out whether Garrick was lying or not. So it was a little bit of a puzzle for him. Garrick was a puzzle he had to kind of figure out. I think Garrick just liked being listened to. That's kind of how his character worked. He just liked having somebody else to talk with. And it was cool because they were good friends. Even though Garrick was he was like morally written as morally ambiguous. You weren't sure if he was working for the Federation or Federation interests, for Cardassian interests, or just kind of for himself. So that's why he was really, really well written. I think, Garrick is one of my probably one of, if not the most favorite characters on Star Trek for myself and a lot of other people. Ironically, the two events she names as a threat to democracy are both instances of the electoral voting, or a literal exercising of democracy. Exactly. The UK voted to leave the EU, and America voted for Trump. Both are democracy functioning exactly as designed, producing a result McCormick did not want. Calling that outcome a crisis for democratic institutions rather than democratic institutions working gives away what she means by the word. It is not democratic at all. In that framing, not the Garrick and Bashir relationship is the real reason a manuscript from an established, professionally contracted Star Trek novelist never went to pocketbooks. A trilogy capstone built around present-day American electoral politics dressed up as Cardassian allegory was never going to clear a licensing meeting, whatever CBS thought of the romance angle. Oh yeah, Garrick was theatrical because he liked to toy with the humans, and with lies and deceit, he was only ever genuine with Bashir. Yeah. Yeah, it was a really, really good, well-written friendship they had. She posted the full manuscript. On Archive of Our Own, she went under the name Alada Prelock, a reference to a Cardassian author in-universe, and posted the entirety of the novel for reading. The plot goes as Garrick, retiring after 5 years as a Castellan, worn down and ailing. He is also married, quietly for 4 years, to Kalas Parmak, the Cardassian doctor who appears throughout Deep Space Nine relaunch novels. Bashir arrives on Cardassia partway through the book, and the household eventually settles into 3 people living, by the final chapters sleeping under one roof. Garrick and Bashir kiss on the page during the book's climax again, written well after the fact of the original pitch of the novel, an addition she clearly added as fan fiction. Armak tells Bashir directly that he was the great passion of Garrick's life. The concept is ridiculous, and between this and the Trump-deranged politics she tried to weave into something that she initially started in 2013, long before she could even conceive that Trump existed, makes it better that this book never saw the light of day. The editors over at Pocket Books and Paramount seem to have made a good decision about this one. Star Trek novel does not need a real-world electoral argument stapled to its spine to make its point about tyranny and reconstruction. The first 2 books in this trilogy already made that case involving the way Cardassians operate, not as an allegory for America, and made it better. It also doesn't need canon characters shipped into gay romance, something we're sick enough as seeing in Star Trek fans. Yeah. He posted the novel here if you feel like reading it. I don't feel like reading it. You think they made the right call in rejecting us, of course. Yes. Yep. Glad I didn't make it. Exactly. Yes, John Douglas. That was the only comment on this one. I'm not familiar with this. I don't know if anybody here is. I think I'm going to skip this one. Lane Pardoe's Land and Sea books 2 and 4. I don't know about these either. This is probably more of a promotion of some of these things. Oh, that looks pretty cool. Look at that thing. With this like a space marine person. What is this about again? Oh, he's reviewing. John A. Douglas is reviewing these. I probably would find these more interesting if I read more. I do need to read more. I need to like do less of like doom scrolling and looking at YouTube videos and just read what other people are writing. All right, what is this one? There we go. Bill Holt writes, "The end of Oak Street is a bait and switch, and I walked out of the theater. I just stormed out of the end of Oak Street with popcorn still in the bag. This was 40 minutes of my life I'll never get back, and $18 I could have spent on almost anything else, including nothing. Spoilers ahead, and you're welcome because I just saved you a trip." Blaine Pardoe, the BattleTech writer. Yeah, I don't know much about some of these writers or these books. I was just saying I should probably look into that. Halfway through the movie, they kill the dad and injure the son so the mom can become a female warrior. That's the whole film in a nutshell. Everything before that is throat clearing, and everything after that is a different movie than the one they sold me in the trailer. I want to watch this trailer, but I think the stream will get flagged. You can't even watch trailers on streams because you get flagged. Here's why I'm mad. I don't pay for movies anymore. I stopped years ago for exactly this reason. But the marketing on this one had a dad, a mom, a son, a daughter, a station wagon, and dinosaurs coming down a suburban street. A family holding the line together while the world falls apart. That's a movie I'll drive to. That's a movie I'll pay a babysitter for. So I paid. My mistake. The red flags were there. I ignored them. Looking back, the movie tells you what it thinks of you in the first 10 minutes. Chose not to listen, learn from me. The couple bickers from frame one, not banter, not two people who like each other giving each other grief, bickering. She's clipped, she's defensive, and the script treats this as the natural resting state of marriage. Dad got laid off weeks ago. Of course he did. Cannot have a competent father in a movie like this. He has to arrive pre-broken so nobody in the audience gets confused about who's going to be useless later. Oh yeah, Frank the Fox did do a video on this. Mom is secretly writing a book about how miserable she is being a wife and a mother, secretly behind her family's back. And the film frames this as her brave inner life instead of what it obviously is. She acts like she's too good for all of them. Every scene, she's the only adult in the room. Every scene, her face says she's settled. She guilts him over one drink. A man loses his job, the world is ending, he pours 2 fingers of something, and his wife turns it into a referendum on his character. The camera holds on her disapproval like we're supposed to nod along. The son cannot hit a giant dinosaur standing directly in front of him with a bow and arrow. Target roughly the size of a delivery truck. He misses repeatedly. It's played for a wince. Mom never misses with the rifle. Not once. No training. No arc. No scene where she learns. She picks it up and she's Annie Oakley. The woman-splaining sequence. Then comes the exposition scene, and this is where I started shifting in my seat. Mom and the daughter lay out the entire plot for us. The situation, the plan, the stakes, the map. They are lucid, informed, and correct about everything. Dad babbles. He interrupts with a question that's already been answered. He looks confused. The daughter explains it to him a second time, slower, and the theater laughed. I did not laugh. I've seen this scene in 40 movies. And the joke is always the same joke, and the target is always the same target. Yeah, that was the... you guys remember when they were doing the Cars movie, the trailer? They just decided to make that the running joke. No, actually it started with Pixar's Finding Nemo. It's like, what is with men and not asking for directions? So they kept on using that joke over and over and over again. I never understood it. I was like, is that a thing? Like, men just not asking for directions? I didn't even know that was a thing. But everybody laughed at it like, oh, and so true. I was like, really? And you're just going to keep on using it? So at that point, it's not even a joke anymore. It's just like, you're just negging on men. That's all you're doing. But that's exactly what he's talking about here. Then they change the cast. The family is white, which the movie clearly considers a problem it needs to solve, so they adopt a mixed-race girl who's lost her parents. Understand me, I have nothing against the character or the actress who's fine, but watch what the writers actually do with the roster. We came in with a balanced family. Father, mother, son, daughter, 2 and 2. By the middle of the second act, it's 3 females and 1 boy. The boy is wounded and can't shoot. That's not a story choice, that's a head count. The librarian with the shotgun, and then God help me, a librarian shows up. Cardigan, glasses, shotgun. She saves the woman, racks the slide, and delivers a female empowerment battle cry to the ceiling while the score swells. That's where I left. Row H, aisle, seat, out the door. I didn't look back at the screen once. This is the part that actually bothers me. I want to be clear about what my objection is because someone's going to say I can't handle a woman with a gun. Love a mother defending her kids. Sarah Connor works, Ripley works. Give me a woman who fights for her family and I'll cheer until I'm hoarse. That's not what this movie does. This movie cannot make the mother strong without making the father dead and the son crippled. It cannot let her win unless the men lose first. It doesn't build her up, it clears the room. A family in a crisis is one of the great engines in all of storytelling, and this script threw it in the wood chipper by the halfway mark so it could deliver a message it was too cowardly to put in the trailer. They knew. That's the part that gets me. They knew who'd buy a ticket to a movie about a family and dinosaurs in a suburban street, and they sold it to us anyway. The verdict, bait and switch garbage like this is the exact reason I stopped paying for movies in the first place. I made an exception and I got punished for it. Consider the lesson relearned. Maybe the back half redeems it. I doubt it. Not going back to find out, and neither should you. My advice: save your money. Rating: 1 arrow. Missed. I mean, a piddly bow and a rifle against a giant dino is pretty stupid. Even if he hit it, it would do diddly squat. Same with a rifle. If it's that big, its height is probably thicker than asphalt. But let me guess, the rifle wounds it and it runs away. I don't know. I haven't seen the movie. Well, there's a lot of comments on this one. Wow, there's a lot. Look at all that. Well, I'm not going to watch that movie. So, there. The Marvel Studios revealed the first wave of its rebooted X-Men cast on Saturday's D23 showcase, closing out a mutant rollout that's actually been unfolding in pieces since 2024. Casting looks mostly white. That's interesting. Is this Storm? The new team, Sadie Sink as Jean Grey, Kit Connor as Cyclops, Christopher Abbott as Professor X, Indy Navarrete as Rogue. Oh, she's the Obsession actress. Why is she Rogue? Maya Boyd as Storm, Samara Weaving as Emma Frost, and Adam Driver as a villain teased under the name Nathaniel Milbury. Kevin Feige told the crowd more casting news is still coming before director Jake Schreier's film opens on May 5th, 2028. As announced, the confirmed lineup runs 4 women to 3 men. To understand why this reveal landed the way it did, it helps to walk through how Marvel got here. The mutants have been trickling into the MCU for 2 years now, through 2 very different doors. First door was nostalgia. Deadpool and Wolverine kicked things off in 2024 by pulling Channing Tatum's long-standing Gambit out of Fox era development hell for a proper cameo. Then in March 2025, Marvel confirmed something bigger during a 5-hour livestream cast reveal for Avengers Doomsday. The studio wasn't just bringing X-Men into the MCU, it was bringing back the original Fox cast to do it. Patrick Stewart is Professor X, Ian McKellen is Magneto, James Marsden is Cyclops, Rebecca Romijn is Mystique, Alan Cumming is Nightcrawler, Kelsey Grammer reprising Beast, role he'd already dusted off for a Marvel post-credit scene. For fans who grew up on the 2000s trilogy, reads as a reunion nobody expected Disney's messy Fox acquisition to actually deliver. And outlets covering the reveal described longtime skeptics of the modern MCU getting pulled back in specifically because of it. The second door opened much more quietly and much more recently. Sadie Sink was cast in Spider-Man Brand New Day back in March 2025 in a role Marvel kept locked down for 16 months. Fans spent that entire stretch building a circumstantial case. Her red hair, sightings of her in green and yellow on a set, a trusted scooper post in February 2026 that got immediately picked up across fan press despite zero official confirmation. Sink herself denied it when asked directly after casting, which in hindsight reads either as a cover story or a genuine no comment. The truth came out about 70 minutes into Brand New Day's July 31 release. Sink is Jean Grey, introduced as an antagonistic Omega-level telepath hunting the Department of Damage Control, who by the film's end has formed a real connection with Peter Parker and rides a bus toward what's implied to be a Westchester County, the future site of Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters. It was the clearest signal yet that Marvel's new MCU original X-Men team was coming, that Sink would anchor it. Well, I'm given the role she plays in the Spider-Man movie, I have no interest in that. Like she's they've already done the damage to her, given the role she played in that movie. So I don't understand like how that's supposed to go. Victor Assassin says it's why I like shows where they had a female comic relief. At least they know that women can make mistakes, learn and improve otherwise. Yeah. Or improve themselves. Now the X-Men is used for minorities, allegories. Even race-obsessed Browns don't like that direction. Yeah. I think ever since Stan Lee was removed from the whole thing, it's gotten worse and worse and worse. I think it was still pretty bad. I didn't have as much interest in it, but yeah, it's just not been the same. That's the 2-year run-up. The old cast gets one last outing in Doomsday this fall, and the new cast, seeded through Sync's Brand New Day reveal, is now filling out at D23. Given that build-up, the actual gender math on the new roster is worth being precise about. 4 of 7 confirmed characters, Jean Grey, Rogue, Storm, and Emma Frost, are women. 3. Cyclops, Professor X, and Driver's villain are men. That's a narrow majority, not a rout. And Feige was explicit that the roster isn't finished. Marvel hasn't yet announced who's playing Wolverine, Beast, Angel, or Iceman. The core of Stan Lee and Jack Kirby's original 1963 lineup, all traditionally male roles that would shift the ratio back toward, even if filled conventionally. I bet you anything, by the way, that they're going to make him gay. Because I think that's what they did with the comic books. Even so, the reveal was enough to revive a fight that's followed Marvel since 2019. The term MCU entered fan discourse around Captain Marvel's release that year and became a genuine flashpoint in 2022 when She-Hulk, Attorney at Law, leaned directly into the criticism inside the show itself, mocking the backlash even as it kept generating more of it. Critics of the trend point to Captain Marvel, Black Widow, The Marvels, Miss Marvel, and She-Hulk as a stretch where Marvel prioritized visible representation shifts during a run of genuinely underperforming films, both critically and at the box office. Defenders counter that full MCU catalog still skews heavily male by raw numbers, and that blaming any one demographic shift for the studio's broader slump, driven at least as much by oversaturation and rushed scripts, oversimplifies what actually went wrong. Where this X-Men reveal lands, that argument depends entirely on the names still to come. A team built around Wolverine, Cyclops, and Professor X as its traditional core plays very differently than one where Grey, Storm, and Rogue end up carrying the majority of screen time once the full roster and plot are locked. For now, Marvel has spent 2 years building genuine anticipation through the old cast's farewell tour and Sync's long-hidden reveal, and cashed a good chunk of that goodwill in on a cast list that's already reopened a 5-year-old argument before a single frame has been shot. Does the second wave of casting settle the MCU question one way or the other, or has Marvel already spent its build-up on a reveal that guaranteed this exact reaction regardless of who gets announced? Yeah, I'm not interested in it. By the way, I've never been that interested in the X-Men. I was never a huge X-Men fan. Growing up, I was a huge fan of Ninja Turtles. Ninja Turtles was a big one. I liked Digimon. I watched some Disney stuff, of course, like DuckTales and Goof Troop. Darkwing Duck, things like that. But X-Men was never something I was largely into. And now what's this about fan fiction? Fan fiction has quietly taken over science fiction and fantasy, and it's a disaster. Alchemized hit #1 on the New York Times bestseller list this fall. Alchemized, huh? Legendary paid more than $3 million for the film rights, reportedly a record for a debut novel. The book started its life in 2023 as Manacled, a Draco Malfoy and Hermione Granger fanfiction posted on Archive of Our Own. Senlin Yu stripped out the Harry Potter names, renamed the leads Helena Marino and Kane Farron, and sold the result to Del Rey as an original dark romantasy. Oh, God. Okay. The industry turned it into the current business model of an entire genre. 50 Shades of Grey is the template everyone points to, and for good reason. E.L. James wrote it as Master of the Universe. A Twilight fanfiction where Edward Cullen became a rich CEO and Bella Swan became a college student he tied to a bed. James filed the serial numbers off, self-published, and sold more than 100 million copies. The book became the mainstream face of fan fiction and dragged the genre's most explicit corners into bookstores everywhere. Ali Hazelwood's The Love Hypothesis followed the same path from a different fandom. The game began as Reylo fanfiction built around Rey and Kylo Ren from the Star Wars sequels. Two other 2025 releases, Julie Soto's Rose in Chains and Bridget Knightley's The Irresistible Urge to Fall for Your Enemy, both started as Dramion fic as well. Publishers now have a name for the practice. Pull to pub. Take a fic with a built-in audience of tens of thousands of readers on AO3, scrub the copyrighted names, and put it on shelves. Romantasy did not develop this pattern by accident. The genre's biggest recent breakouts share a common origin story. A woman writing explicit, often BDSM-inflected scenarios about existing male characters, then repackaging that work for a mass audience once the built-in fandom proves the sales numbers. The magic systems and necromancy estates are set dressing on top of what the source material actually was. None of this started with Alchemized or 50 Shades. It goes back nearly 60 years. The through line is women writing sexual fantasies about male characters who were never written to be together, then convincing themselves and everyone else that the pairing was there all along. Fanfiction pairing male characters romantically, known in the community as slash, traces to Star Trek fandom in the late 1960s. Women fans began writing Kirk and Spock as a couple while the original series was still airing. Wow, far back. The word slash itself comes from the punctuation mark those fans placed between the two names. They coined the Vulcan word Tila for the pairing and built an entire reoccurring plot device, Pon farr, around a biological mating cycle that supposedly forced Spock into sex to survive. Star Trek fandom invented the convention. Every fandom since has followed the same formula. Yeah, it's disgusting. Buffy the Vampire Slayer fans picked it up in late 1990s, pairing off the show's men with each other instead of the women they were written to love. The show's watcher, Rupert Giles, got shipped with his own underage students. What? Detail that says plenty about how little regard this culture has for a character, who a character actually is or should be paired with. Harry Potter fandom did the same to Draco Malfoy, turning a character whose family joined a genocidal blood purity movement into a misunderstood romantic lead for Harry, or for Sirius Black's brother Regulus. Character who appears in the books only after he is already dead. Part of the Wolfstar pairing branch. I almost thought that said Wolfstar. One popular fic rewriting that generation of characters is treated by parts of the fandom as authoritative than what J.K. Rowling actually wrote. By the 2000s, the fantasy stopped confining itself to fictional characters. Fandom put real musicians into the same machine. But really? Fans convinced themselves Harry Styles and Louis Tomlinson were secretly a couple so aggressively that Tomlinson said on the record it damaged their actual friendship. What? My Chemical Romance's Gerard Way was paired with bandmate Frank Iroh over onstage kisses, and when that lost steam, with his own younger brother. The practice of writing real, living people into sexual scenarios they never consented to becomes normalized here. Not confined to Draco Malfoy anymore, but aimed at real human beings. Oh God. The 2010s produced the ugliest branch of the family tree. Supernatural fandom shipped the show's two lead brothers together before moving on to Dean and Angel Castiel, and its writers openly fed the obsession for ratings. That same quarter of fandom produced the Omegaverse, a subgenre built on male pregnancy and animalistic mating hierarchies that started as fiction about the actual actors on the show before spreading everywhere. Sonic the Hedgehog fandom got in on it too, producing pregnant Sonic content. Pairings that include Mario. If the subgenre can make a video game hedgehog carry Mario's child, gross is not an overstatement. It is an accurate word. What? Oh no. Even sports have not been spared either. Rachel Reed's Heated Rivalry, a best-selling hockey romance, is built openly on the real-life rivalry between NHL players Alexander Ovechkin and Sidney Crosby. The broader wave of hockey fan fiction pairing real athletes together got bad enough that Alexander Wenberg's wife had to publicly ask fans to stop shipping her husband with his teammates. Television has run the same play without calling it fan fiction. Star Trek is where the pattern closes its loop. Paramount Star Trek Starfleet Academy introduced Jaden Craig, the franchise's first openly gay Klingon, played by Kareem Diane. Is it Diane? Diane is described his character in interviews as Ferdinand the Bull, a warrior species reimagined as a pacifist medical student, and has been candid that the role was built from the ground up as advocacy for gay representation. The character enters a same-sex relationship with a fellow cadet within the show's first episode. Fans were shipping Kirk and Spock as lovers before the original series even finished its first run. 6 decades later, Paramount put that fan impulse directly into canon and made an actual Klingon gay. Klingons were built as a warrior culture defined by honor and combat. Rewriting one into a gentle, romance-driven pacifist is not a natural extension of 60 years of Star Trek lore. It is the same move fanfiction writers have made since the 1960s. Take an established character, strip the traits that made him what he was, and refit him to serve a preferred romantic pairing. Alex Kurtzman's Starfleet Academy did not need to originate on a fanfic archive to run on fanfic logic. The show got canceled after 2 seasons, review bombed on release, and sitting at 1.8 out of 10 on IMDb despite an 88% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes. A gap that tells its own story about who these shows are actually made for. Fanfiction has existed since readers first started writing their own endings for stories they loved. What has changed is the direction of the pipeline. 60 years ago, it stayed, and mimeographed zines passed between women at conventions. Today, it gets bought by major publishers, adapted by Hollywood studios for 7-figure sums, installed as canon in the same 60-year-old franchise that started the whole practice, all while the original creative teams that built these worlds get pushed to the side. Bestseller lists and streaming green lights increasingly run on repurposed fantasies about existing male characters, filed off and resold as original work or slotted directly into canon. Readers and viewers are consuming stories built to service someone else's fetish for a familiar face, not stories built from the ground up. How many more original bestsellers and franchise reboots over the next few years will turn out to have started the same way, as fan fiction with the names changed, or in Starfleet Academy's case, not changed at all? Yep, noticed this years ago, tried to sound the warning, the worst aspects of fan fiction writers have taken over, and this has made literature worse. Exactly, yes. Don't forget about Naruto and Sasuke. That shit was radioactive during the airing of Naruto Shippuden. Yeah, you destroy your own fandom over these things. That's what this does. I think it's purposeful in that sense. I think it's just in your face, like, hey, look what I'm doing to your franchise. Everything wrong with modern fandom started with Trekkies, and they have the nerve to throw shade at Star Wars heads. I did like the original cut Voltrons, where it was darker, grittier. The Yaoi Yuri crowd are always the most toxic of people. Yeah. This is why we didn't give them the right to vote initially, right? Repeal the 19th, yeah. They vote for their snatch. The female gaze cannot be unseen. It can't. That's why I choose the sexuality of an Adeptus Astartes. Astartes, it should be right. Another Bill Holt article. Harrison Ford, Hollywood hero. Great example of how Hollywood self-imploded is the career of Harrison Ford. In his heyday, he starred in not one, but two of the most successful franchises in history, Indiana Jones and Star Wars. As Han Solo in the original Star Wars trilogy, Ford embodied the ultimate rogue. Cocky, charismatic, quick-witted, and always getting the girl and the classic damsel rescued by the hero dynamic. In Raiders of the Lost Ark and its 3 sequels, his Indiana Jones was the epitome of rugged masculinity. A whip-cracking archaeologist adventurer who outsmarted Nazis, romanced strong but supported women like Marion Ravenwood, and saved the day with brains, brawn, and unapologetic heroism. Air Force One saw Ford playing the President of the United States, kicking terrorist ass and declaring "Get off my plane" in a peak patriotic alpha male role that grossed over $315 million worldwide. Other hits like Blade Runner, he was the brooding, hard-boiled detective Deckard. In The Fugitive, he was the wrongly accused everyman fighting the system. And Witness earned him an Oscar nod for protecting the innocent. Ford was Hollywood's go-to leading man for action, drama, and romance, raking in billions and defining pop culture for decades. Then, the female empowerment agenda hit and Hollywood started deconstructing his icons to make room for diverse reboots and girl boss narratives. Han Solo, dead from a sacrificial stab by his own son, paving way for Mary Sue Ray to inherit his ship, his blaster, and his legacy, all without earning it. Indy is a depressed old man, cucked by his snarky goddaughter Helena, who bosses him around, steals his thunder, and even wears the fedora in promotional vibes. It went on to flop hard at the box office. $384 million against a $300 million budget. Oh. Deckard was relegated to cameo status in Blade Runner 2017, where the once iconic replicant hunter is a hermit hiding in a casino. Its mystery unraveled to serve Ryan Gosling's story, another legacy character diminished for the new guard. Ford's box office draw plummeted from consistent $100 million hits to bombs, with audiences rejecting the gut-woke go-broke formula that turned his tough guy personas into cautionary tales of male obsolescence. Hollywood didn't just age him out, they neutered his legends to push empowerment propaganda, proving that when you mess with classics or politics, fans bail and the empires crumble. Rest in shame, Hollywood. A short but sweet little essay. And this is a video from John Del Rose talking about how Kurtzman is out. I guess you could watch this on his channel too, but I'll let you all do that. But he's got a JDA Talks channel where he talks about these things in little clips like this if he doesn't have time to write the articles. I'll also share something with you guys. I was planning on making a video about this, but since I'm streaming already, I wrote this recently. And I don't know, do I want to end with this? There's some stuff about Marvel's Wolverine. I could read that too later on too, but I'll read this. This is my article that that got published earlier today, and I've got another one on its way. But this would work into if Deranged Doomer is doing some stuff on like grifters, and if we're just talking about grifters in general, then this could be added to the pile of chuds talking about grifters. But Critical Drinker and the Limits of Anti-Woke Centrism. Commentators like the Critical Drinker have built large audiences by formerly mocking franchise mismanagement. There was a time when that kind of criticism landed well with viewers and grew his channel. While many of his complaints were surface level in substance, viewers latched on to the sentiments expressed as some kind of traditional zeal against progressive politics. Many left-wing observers frequently label him as right-wing or even conservative simply for opposing progressive media. However, if one digs a little deeper into his commentary, one will find his beliefs align more with the left than the right. This topic is worth addressing because of the real influence Will Jordan, Drinker, has accumulated. Millions of people treat his videos as more than casual entertainment. They take his cultural diagnoses seriously. He regularly appears alongside other prominent commentators, collaborates with organizations, and shapes discourse far beyond his own channel. The "I'm just an entertainer" or "it's only my opinion" framing does not cancel that influence. When enough people treat the commentary as meaningful, and when the commentator himself engages with political and cultural institutions, the ideas themselves become fair game for examination. Jordan frames his standards as neutral and craft-based rather than political or subjective. In interviews, he has said that he approaches reviewing from a politically neutral standpoint, that he wants to review on its own merits, that he refuses to dismiss a film simply because it is liberal or conservative. He consistently invokes a set of practical standards, setup and payoff, consistent character logic, earned development, etc., and treats them as obvious measures of quality. While he attempts to contrast older films with modern failures, he never explains where the standards for those films come from, how they developed, or most importantly, why they should be authoritative beyond the claim that he believes they produced better entertainment. Ultimately, there is no sustained appeal to any defined principles of storytelling or film theory. Jordan has never even invoked a specific cultural or moral tradition, much less a detailed historical argument about why older practices were superior on any deeper grounds than a matter of personal taste. His standards are presented as self-evident. And some of this is from a link here, but note that he explicitly refuses to dismiss a film simply because it is liberal or conservative, and that he will not discount stories or viewpoints merely for falling on one side of the political spectrum. In his eyes, both the left and the right are just viewpoints to be weighed by craft rather than by truth. This reduces the culture war to nothing more than optional flavors of content consumption rather than competing accounts of reality. Jordan also consistently frames the problem with media as execution. He repeatedly refers to the heavy-handed message, which is his catch-all for progressive identity politics, virtue signaling, and ideology overriding story and character. He objects when studios lecture to you, surface layer stuff, but he does not outright reject the deeper progressive premises that make those practices seem legitimate in the first place. For instance, he acknowledges the idea that there is some historical underrepresentation of certain identity groups, which has created an ongoing moral debt that must be repaid through preferential casting, hiring, or narrative focus. This means that he views said representation itself as a primary artistic good, just so long as the movie doesn't announce it. When he talks about people who never got their shot, he is describing the progressive claim that certain groups were systematically excluded and therefore deserve compensatory inclusion now. By treating that claim as the background reality and only criticizing the clumsy or reverse discriminatory ways it is applied, he leaves that premise unchallenged. That is a tacit acceptance of the left's framing of history and justice, even if he rejects the most aggressive applications of it. A more thorough critique would question whether the historical narrative itself is accurate or relevant as a guide for current creative decisions. Hey, the Otis Whisperer, what's up, man? Jordan treated the Bill and Frank episode of HBO's The Last of Us, Long Time, as good television. He praised the episode for its writing, performances, and emotional weight. However, he did not treat the fact that Bill and Frank were homosexuals as something requiring comment, much less a moral evaluation. He did not frame the relationship as a positive or negative development in cultural terms at all. In fact, he simply proceeded as if the homosexuality was just another background detail. That silence is the data that reveals the operating assumption. Adult homosexual relationships are already normalized and outside the realm of live moral or cultural dispute. The only variables that still matter to him are the quality of the writing and whether the material stops to lecture you about its progressivism. Jordan's commentary doesn't come from a traditional conservative posture, nor is it a classical Christian one. Instead, his is the posture of someone whose moral baseline was set by the post-1990s liberal settlement in which sexual liberalism had already been largely accepted, and the remaining fights were over how explicit the activism ought to be. Traditional right-wingers and conservatives who treat influencers like the critical drinker as some kind of cultural ally should register this clearly. While the shared opposition to the progressive heavy-handed message creates an appearance of common ground, Jordan's silence on the actual substance of progressivism itself reveals where his true allegiances lie. Despite his insistence that he is not critique on political grounds, his operating assumption is that adult homosexual relationships are normal and outside the realm of moral or cultural dispute. And again, the only variable that matters to him in that regard is whether the material lectures him about it. Otherwise, the sodomy passes without remark. This is one of the main difficulties when engaging anyone who operates in a contemporary centrist libertarian mode. They will insist they are not political, that they simply want good stories judged on craft. Yet they almost never question the deeper progressive assumptions that now govern how identity is handled in entertainment. This includes assumptions about sexuality and traditional moral frameworks. People like Jordan operate based on the premise that underlying progressive assumptions are settled background reality rather than politically charged contested claims. In practice, he is working inside a progressive framework that he has already accepted as given, even while presenting himself as neutral. The reason we will never roll back the culture to 2005 or 1998 or whenever Jordan believes movies were better is because society has moved the moral center of gravity away from any residual Christian influence. Media that once operated under a broadly Christian, or at least traditionalist canopy was essentially rendered a politically and ideologically neutral commercial product before it was eventually and inevitably updated according to the evolving tastes of the educated progressive class. And Jordan tacitly accepts this mode of thinking, which means he is in no position to contest its contemporary iterations as any kind of culture war ally. There is no public evidence that Will Jordan is a Christian. He has never spoken about personal faith, church involvement, Christian belief, or any theological commitments. While he wants the residual comforts and cultural amenities that a broadly Christian society once produced, he remains uninterested in or actively detached from the Christ who made those amenities possible. He wants coherent storytelling and competent male heroes who face real adversity, yet he fails to acknowledge that those ideals are downstream of a culture that flourished for centuries under a Christian moral and anthropological framework. Jordan's posture is one that enjoys the fruit while declining the root. What do you make of this pattern among anti-woke cultural critics? Is the centrist libertarian posture a useful temporary alliance, or does it ultimately limit any meaningful pushback on the culture war front? Yeah, the actor who played Garrick, the Otis Whisperer, he said that, I think, much later. I wonder if he said it just to appease Kind of the culture war mob, the leftist mob. Hey, it's Mark Fox. Drinker praised the movie The Whale. When he did that, I knew the kind of person he was. That movie is an anti-Christian, pro-homosexual film where Christians are treated as monsters for rejecting a family who has given himself over to wickedness. Yeah. And there are more comments, but I think I will just go with this last article, the Wolverine thing, because it's more recent, and then I'll end there. Maybe we'll watch a video. I think there was a video I wanted to watch too, but it is getting kind of late. I didn't want to do stream too much tonight. But Marvel's Wolverine. Backlash widens from meme mockery into casting and writing credits ahead of September launch. Marvel's Wolverine has become a punching bag on social media in the weeks before its September 15 PS5 release, and the criticism has moved well past jokes about combat footage into pointed questions about who wrote the game and who was in it. The reaction intensified after preview embargoes lifted this week and gameplay clips started circulating, with one widely shared comparison placing footage of Wolverine fighting a Sentinel next to a clip from a PS2-era Ben 10 Protector of Earth. A Spanish-language repost of the comparison pulled in tens of thousands of likes before an English version did even better, and other clips mocked Wolverine's movement and combat controls directly. Insomniac's community and marketing director James Stevenson addressed the pile-on X. I think the wild way this algorithm amplifies and forces negativity upon you has me reconsidering my philosophy on telling devs to look or post here, he wrote, adding that the reaction felt like a relentless onslaught that I cannot believe is good for anyone's mental health or representative. Nor representative. The replies were not kind. One user shot back, "Hey man, counterpoint, have you ever thought about making good video games?" A handful of others told him to ignore the noise and keep posting for the players who actually care. GameSpot picked up the story Monday morning with a piece framing the entire backlash as another case of manufactured internet negativity built around Stevenson's algorithm complaint and a comparison to 2018's Puddlegate flap over Spider-Man's E3 demo footage. The outlet also tied the mood to Sony's decision to end PS5 disc production, arguing PlayStation fans are primed to be angry about something regardless of the actual target. What that framing never engages with is the specific, more substantive criticism running through a large share of the actual posts. Criticism about writing credits and casting, rather than combat animations. One thread centers on who wrote the game. A widely shared post from X-account Polywar claimed the lead screenwriter for Wolverine is an author of LGBT novels for black teenagers, tying her directly to Spider-Man 2 and asserting she ruined that game's story. The writer in question is Brittany Morris, and the facts check out only part way. Morris's own X bio confirms she holds the title Advanced Writer at Insomniac across both Spider-Man PS5 and Wolverine PS5, and her author bio lists contributions to both games. What isn't accurate is lead screenwriter. Wikipedia's credited writing team for Wolverine lists 4 names: Mary Kenny, Walt Williams, Joe Halstead, and Nick Folkman, with Morris not among the top billed credits. She's a confirmed contributor, not the sole or lead voice on the script. Morris is the best-selling author of Slay and The Cost of Knowing, both aimed at young black readers, and her X handle includes a pride flag consistent with the LGBT novels framing. Though the claim that she personally ruined Spider-Man 2's story is a subjective opinion stated as fact in the original post, not something borne out by that game's reception or its list of 11 credited writers. Oh, God. The second thread from the account Learning the Law compiles images of 6 Wolverine characters under the caption, "The female and confirmed they-them characters in the video game Marvel's Wolverine." Pairing character models with what the post presents as the real-world performers or artists behind them, including a credit reveal reading "Leech, Noga Wind." That post has pulled over 300 likes and 3,700 views this week. Fandom Pulse has not independently verified each individual's stated identity beyond what's shown in that post, and readers should treat the specific pairings as claims circulating on X rather than confirmed Insomniac casting statements. Meanwhile, early hands-on previews, including GameSpot's own, have been positive on Wolverine's combat and tone. The game remains a strong PlayStation Store pre-order performer, so the backlash clearly hasn't tanked interest. But collapsing every criticism into algorithm-driven toxicity lets outlets like GameSpot avoid engaging with a verifiable claim about writing credits sitting right beside the backlash they're dismissing. Stevenson may be right that X's engagement incentives are distorting the volume and tone of that reaction. That doesn't mean every question inside that reaction is manufactured or false, and treating them as identical is its own kind of dodge. So does GameSpot's "it's all just algorithm-driven negativity" framing hold up when a real, checkable question about writing credits is sitting inside the backlash it's dismissing? Or is sorting fair criticism from bad information exactly discernment social media makes impossible? They need an angry white guy to write Wolverine. Yeah. An angry Canadian who's angry with other Canadians would be cool. You wouldn't even sail the 7 seas for this crap. Yeah, it's gonna be bad. Ranting for Vengeance did a decent video about this. They keep hiring people who are all ill-equipped to write a character like Wolverine. Yeah. Spider-Man as well. Some kind of toxic masculinity. He's probably going to be feminized. Very likely. Comparison Clash of Titans film. I think I just did this one, right? Yeah, a little bit of this one. There's more that could be covered, but I think 2 hours is good. And I'll probably do another stream sometime in the future, just covering some more articles. But yep, that's what's going on, Fandom Pulse. I've got a bunch more comments coming in about my article. There's going to be another article of me posted tomorrow, I think. I hope. But yeah, I'll read that one tomorrow as well. I think that's going to be the end of the stream, and I'll catch you guys later. So, sayonara.